arrive and everything. But I think we'll get started just so that we can get to the main important part of our conversation today. So I'm very excited to continue with Navigate today. As we know, on Friday night, we reflected, pondered, discussed the deep topics of relationships. Susanna talked about our social nature and our need for others. Yesterday, we had a super full day. We started with an extremely moving testimony from Tammy about courage and discovering the true dimensions of our lives through illness and crisis, followed by an inspiring talk that we had with Lauren. It was like a call to take advantage of our university years as a time to set course toward our North Stars. This is what she talked about. Do not be afraid to challenge ourselves intellectually and discover how what we're doing now can serve others, even now and in the future. And then we finished our intense day yesterday with Rashad from Optimal Work, who encouraged us to redefine our relationship with challenges, and to see them not as threats, but opportunities for growth. So we had an information session this morning where we learned about the possible next opportunity to take part in the International UNIV Conference, UNIV Inspire, at the end of March. And I'm so excited to welcome our next speaker. So this is Christina Crook. She's called the Marie Kondo of digital by Harper's Bazaar. She's a pioneer and leading voice in the field of digital well-being. She's the author of the award-winning book, The Joy of Missing Out, Finding Balance in a Wired World, and the leader of the global #JOMO movement. She regularly shares her insights in major media outlets and interviews other mindful tech leaders as the host of her JOMOcast podcast. So as we were organizing this conference now and discussing which topics were most important for young women these days, the topic of social media was an obvious choice. I think since COVID hit, our lives are like super mediated. We spend our day in front of the computer, in front of our phones, and all our social activities, our work, everything takes place online. So when we reached out to Christina, and we found out that she leads also Navigate, which is her community seeking to navigate the digital world with integrity and joy, it was like obvious that it was a perfect fit for our conference. Today, she's joining us from Toronto, where she lives with her husband and 3 children. Before passing it right over to Christina, just to let you know, the session will be quite interactive, and we'll make use of the chat function, and you can speak whenever you wish. There'll be time for questions at the end, and we'll use the same dynamic as with the other sessions. You raise your hand, I'll pass the mic over to you, and you can ask whichever questions you wish. So now please join me in welcoming Christina to Navigate. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you all so much. It is a thrill and a joy to be with you today. I'm just going to get sharing here all the fun details we have to take care of. Can everyone see my screen? Just give me a thumbs up. Excellent, excellent. Well, yeah, there was a lot of serendipity around this invitation to speak to you all today. Navigate, it's a concept that has kind of captivated me for many years. It was actually in my university years when a woman in my church actually came up to me with a printout of a ship. It was actually like a online puzzle of a ship, and she'd been woken up in the middle of the night, and she said, "This is a picture that I got for you," and she wanted me to know that I needed to keep course, that I needed to be the ship and not the lifeboat. And it's been this sort of picture that I've been unpacking over the course of my life. So when I launched my membership called Navigate, and then Brianne, honestly, shortly after reached out, it kind of felt like, yeah, this is sort of meant to be. So I won't sort of go too deep on the past of my work, but yes, I am the author of a book called The Joy of Missing Out, Finding Balance in a Wired World. And there's a bit of serendipity around that as well. The book was originally called Digital Detox, and the name had to be changed at the very last moment. It was my publisher who suggested this title of The Joy of Missing Out. It was a term I'd never actually heard before, JOMO. And it completely flipped the conversation from being about removing something, taking something away, detoxing, sort of instantly has this negative connotation to it, to being about the joys we can step into when we step away from our devices. And so I thank God truly every day for that encounter, that problem situation that ended up becoming an enormous blessing in my life. So, and that really did, that book and my own wrestling with how technology was impacting my life for the better and for the worse did lead me to the writing of this book, and really to a decades-long journey through the connection between relationships and technology and joy. So, just one practical note, like Brianna already said, I will be using the chat throughout the presentation. Also, if you haven't already downloaded the values deck that was sent to you before this session, it's in the chat. So if you could download it, grab it from there, that would be awesome. If you don't have a printer at home, just write the 24 values down on a piece of paper and either rip it up or cut it up, because we really do need you to have those physically with you in order to do the full workshop today. Okay, awesome, awesome. Oh, and the question from Emily is, can you resend? I can try, but it is sitting there. Maybe Brianne, you could pop it back in there for those who can't find it. So the joy of missing out. Navigating social media is what we're talking about today. And really, we're talking about the mindful use of technology. Since COVID hit, as Brianna already said, our lives are more mediated than they ever have been before, right? Our social activities, our work, even major life events like weddings, which is baffling to the imagination, have moved online. Finding balance amidst the digital demands have never been more important. So that's why we're here. So one other practical note, if you could turn off the rest of the world right now, that will give you the most out of this session. So turn off your phone if you can, turn messaging off on your devices that you're using right now, your laptops, your desktop computers. The less disruptions we have, the more that you can enter into our discussion today. So a bit of an agenda for those who like to know the lay of the land. We're going to start by talking about what is joy and why does it matter. It's sort of a weird way to frame a conversation about technology, but I'm hopefully going to land for you why I believe it's so important. We're going to talk about the connection between joys and values, and we're going to discover your own personal values. Then we're going to get into Dr. Susan David's work on values, social contagion, and emotional agility, which basically is this idea that our values, knowing our core values, helps us overcome FOMO, overcome social contagion, overcome wanting what other people have that we see on social media. We're going to talk about how to experience the joy of missing out on the right things, then navigating social media with integrity and joy and getting really practical there, and then some Christian practices you can begin implementing from home today. Sound good? All right. So we're going to begin by talking about a big, beautiful, also actually tiny word, which is joy. And I made this incredible discovery actually a couple of years after my book, The Joy of Missing Out, was published, which was the dictionary definition of this teeny tiny word called joy. And written right into the definition, you can see it there, are these words, well-being and success. So what does the definition says? It says, joy is the emotion evoked by well-being, success, or good fortune, or by the prospect of possessing what one desires, right? A source or cause of delight. And I've kind of honed in on these two elements of joy, well-being and success. And those are big, complicated words, but I define well-being as having a positive relationship with our abilities and our limits, and success as the achievement of our goals, whatever they are. So I'll say that one more time. Well-being is having a positive relationship with our abilities and our limits, and success is the achievement of our goals, whatever they are. So here are some words about joy right from scripture, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, and faithfulness. So I commend the enjoyment of life, because there is nothing better for a person under the sun than to eat and drink and be glad. Then joy will accompany them in their toil all the days of the life that God has given them under the sun. But let all who take refuge in you be glad. Let them ever sing for joy. Spread your protection over them, that those who love your name may rejoice in you. It's from Psalm 5:11. The precepts of the Lord are right, giving joy to the heart. The commands of the Lord are radiant, giving light to the eyes. One that many of us are familiar with from a very famous hymn, restore to me the joy of your salvation and grant me a willing spirit to sustain me. And finally, the whole world is filled with awe at your wonders. Where morning dawns, where evening fades, you call forth songs of joy. Joy, this beautiful, tiny, powerful word. So I must explain what joy has to do with technology. What is joy and why does it matter? Well, here's why I believe joy matters when it comes to our relationship with the online world. The path to joy is not effortless, it's effortful. It's not mindless, it's mindful. It requires courage and curiosity and openness to wonder. The things that bring the most joy to your life involve active noticing and nurturing. Two things our online lives often do not demand of us. Noticing is about your attention. Nurturing is about your effort. I have found that prioritizing real embodied joy, noticing and nurturing it has been more important than ever during the pandemic. I wonder if that might be true for you as well. Joy for me is sporting pom-pom necklaces, which were originally made for my canceled birthday party. I was going to have all of my guests wear them, and I started wearing them around the house. You can kind of see them on the couch behind my sparkly fingernails. Another thing that's been bringing me joy, although not right now, during the pandemic. This weaving that you see in the picture, but is also behind me by the wonderful artist Jen Duffin, known as Nova Mercury, who's based in Montreal. Tulips. I'm a Dutch girl, so tulips are a biggie in my house. Fresh cut flowers have been bringing me joy. And then this picture of a picnic table and my bike. I'm writing a new book, and I spent a big chunk of time this past summer writing at a picnic table. That also has been bringing me great joy, though not right now during the winter months. So I want to know, and this is where we're going to have our first bit of interaction in the chat, are what joys have you prioritized during the pandemic? So you can go and start throwing those in the chat. I'm going to read them back so you can hear them and see them. And I just want to say, as you're doing that, it's easy to undermine or diminish the importance of joy, but I hope that by the end of today's session, you'll see how it's imminently practical and also eternally essential. So what joys have you prioritized? I'm going to start reading them back. Going for a walk every day, connecting with old friends, journaling, sitting in the sun, talking with friends, again, reading the classics, spending time working out and exploring with my dog, having morning coffee, being with God, more classics, chilling with my siblings, talking with friends, music, journaling, painting, listening to my favorite music and dancing to them, paint by numbers, walking in nature, hiking, reading, deep conversation, dancing again, finding time to get out of the house each week, treating myself to a special coffee or something, painting and drawing again, running, cooking new recipes, family and friends, getting out of my comfort zone, praying more often. So I'm curious, oh yes, Anna Maria, crying when I need to. Yes, that has been absolutely essential for me as well. So I'm wondering, given what we've learned already in the first few minutes of this presentation, what commonalities you see between these different joys. Are they inside or outside? Are they on our own? Are they with other people? Are they online or are they offline? What are some things you're noticing there? You can jump in the chat and share. They are offline mostly, says Emily. Mostly outside, says Rachel. Offline, yells Juliana. Dora says both. I'm wondering if that's online and offline. Things that require effort, often with others. Mostly about taking care of self or loved ones. Meditative and serving others. Mostly offline, and this person's mentioning using the 5 senses. That's a really awesome insight. Okay, you guys can keep going. I'm going to move on, but you guys can keep going in there. This is awesome, awesome reflection and setting things up perfectly. Another thing that I did was take up the ukulele, and if you were feeling embarrassed about any of the weird things that brought you joy, I thought you might enjoy me playing the ukulele for a moment.
Christina, we don't hear the sound. Mm-hmm.
Can you guys hear? Can you hear the video?
The sound isn't coming through. I'm not sure. Maybe
it's not necessary, but I do hope it works for the other videos I'm going to show you. That's just fine. I did learn to play the ukulele. I think a lot of people took up learning new things, and that was also a very joyful experience. So thank you all for jumping in and sharing already today. So who can relate to this image that you're seeing now? Right. So for many of us, when we reach for our phones, open our laptops, pull out our tablets, or tap our Apple Watches, we feel pulled out of a state of joy. We feel pulled out of the present moment. We say words like too much or overwhelming, stress or never ending, the pull of our devices, the need for them, and also the undeniable draw of them for our attention. Now, it must be said that there is a lot of good that technology delivers. And of course, technology is the wheel and it's the toaster and it's all of the things, but specifically what we're talking about are digital technologies. There are a lot of good these technologies deliver, but many of us are suffering from the overuse of devices, lost sleep, which can lead to a multitude of health effects, diluted relationships, which can lead to disconnection or leading to feelings of regret or therapy, oppressive anxiety, which can lead to a need for medication or some substance abuse, a false sense of urgency, which can lead to undue stress and even adrenal fatigue, toxic comparison, which leads to, in many cases, depression or thwarted creativity because we're constantly comparing ourselves to other people's output or the way their lives look. And the worst, of course, is a feeling of regret, a life void of the good stuff, connection, joy, meaning, peace, or satisfaction, those things that we already talked a bit about in the chat. So the goal today and moving forward is to stop tech from hijacking your resources so that you can accomplish your goals and experience well-being, which ultimately leads to joy. I always share that what undergirds my philosophy of technology is particularly this quote from Professor Emeritus at the University of Montana, Professor Albert Borkman, who's also the author of a book called Technology and the Character of Contemporary Life. He says that my focus is less on setting limits than it is on creating the positive conditions where technology becomes less compelling and different engagements can thrive and flourish. And really what I care about and what I believe to be true about how we actually move out of a place of digital overwhelm is not by heaping on more tasks or shame-inducing to-do lists. The way out of digital overwhelm is leaning in to joy. It's been said that the easiest way to get off tech is to find something else to do and lean into it. So that is truly my belief, and that's why I've anchored my work around technology on joy. We want to create the positive conditions for other engagements to thrive and flourish. The things you value, the things that bring you joy, ultimately the things that make you come alive. So, one of the individuals I've interviewed on my podcast, the JOMOcast, is emotional ethnographer Pamela Pavlisak, who teaches at the Pratt School in New York. She discovered that people who are happy with technology do things differently. She's interviewed thousands of people about their relationship with technology and has tracked their positive and negative technology experiences. She says the difference between those who are happy with tech and those who aren't is part mindset and part action, attention and effort, noticing and nurturing. She's discovered that people happy with tech use it for 3 purposes. You might want to write this down if you're taking notes. People who are happy with technology use it for creating, connecting, and community. So how do we do that? How do we become people who are happy with technology, people who do things differently? Why are we leaning into joy? Why does it matter? Well, like I said before, joy is this combination between well-being and success, having a positive relationship with our abilities and limits, and the achievement of goals aligned with our values. Your values keep you, your well-being, and the achievement of your goals on track. And it needs to be said that joy isn't about one big thing, making a lot of money, getting a great job, getting married, whatever. Joy is about living every day in alignment with your values and knowing how to move towards the things that enrich your life and away from the things that don't. Goals within goals. That's what we're doing here today. Today, you're going to take an essential step towards digital well-being by discovering your values. You'll take an honest, clear-headed look at what's truly important to you, the things you want to structure your life around. Then you're ready for the next step, intentionally moving toward those things. So, before we begin, what are values? Well, they are principles that guide our decisions. You've got them, you might not know what they are. Every decision, big or small, is value-driven, whether we realize it or not. They're personal and they're important. When we live according to our values, we experience satisfaction and happiness. Things are aligned and it feels good. When we don't, we feel the opposite. There's tension, inner turmoil. Things aren't lining up. Our values dictate how we navigate life's many, many choices. Values are like our navigation system, telling us where to turn. The tricky thing is that sometimes we've adopted values subconsciously. They've hijacked the GPS. We face many choices each day. Some choices are huge, right? They move the dial. They matter in the big picture. We often pause long enough to consider the ramifications of these choices. Is this the career I long for? Is this the school I want to go to? Is this the person I want to marry? Some choices are small, right? The stakes are low. They don't seem to matter in the big picture. We rarely pause to consider the outcomes of these kinds of decisions. However, regardless of how big or small, the sum of all these choices does decide the course of our lives. Whether we are aware of it or not, our values drive our choices. There are 2 types of values that influence our choices every day. Aspirational values are those we aspire to and intentionally choose. Those are the ones we're going to be identifying today. And practice values, those we act upon. We may not choose or acknowledge them, but our actions speak louder than our words. The distinction between the 2 kinds of values is enormous. Regardless of what we say we value, our practice values steer the direction of our lives by governing our choices. The goal is for our aspirational values and practice values to be one and the same. Let me break this down and make this really practical. Let's say you're a person that says you value balance. You define this as taking time for exercise or spending time with friends, investing in your daily work, and so on. When you manage your time well and are mindful of your choices, you're spending your resources, your time and attention and energy in ways that align with what you value. Balance. Well done, you. You're on the right path, living in a way you intend to. Satisfaction abounds, and you likely feel empowered to keep heading in the right direction. When you are not spending your resources in a way that aligns with your values, things feel askew. Another value has hijacked your good intentions and is driving your choices. You're off course. Maybe work or school overshadows every other part of your life. As a result, you're spending your resources on things you value less. Perhaps power or success or influence have taken the wheel instead. Or maybe your social life takes a front seat. Again, your resources don't fully align with leading a balanced life, and your work or health may suffer as a result. This is the difference between aspirational and practice values. When they align, like I said before, we experience deep satisfaction and joy. We flourish when our hearts and actions work in harmony. We are living the way we intend to. When they don't align, we experience inner conflict, which can be marked by confusion or frustration and stress, even exhaustion, a lack of peace. We simply cannot flourish. While we may not acknowledge this disconnect, it does take its toll. Misalignment depletes our physical and emotional resources. And if you think about your relationship with social media for a minute, you might see where some of that exhaustion is coming from. The consequences of conflicted living is problematic. Without paying close attention to our everyday choices, we run off course and find ourselves on a path we never intended to be on. The longer we ignore the disconnect, the further we venture from our intended path, our intended destination. By assessing the way we spend our time and energy on a regular basis, we can identify if our practice values and aspirational values are working in harmony. This is our aim. So, without further ado, we are going to begin our values discovery exercise. And the sound doesn't work, but that's okay because I'll voice it over. If you can, please get out your decks. I would like you can sit on the floor, you can have a table in front of you. You need to, as you can see in the image here, you do need to have all of your cards out where you can see them all face up. So I'll give you a minute to get those ready. And I want to be clear that this is a self-discovery process. The objective of this exercise is to give you a practical way to identify your aspirational values. And to get the most useful results from this exercise, I encourage you to try and make your decisions as quickly as possible. You'll understand what I mean in a minute. This activity is meant to be done intuitively. If you find yourself overthinking, challenge yourself to make a quick gut check and go with that. This exercise is a great test of your relationship to FOMO, the fear of missing out. You can't have it all. Sorry, friends. Okay, so you will find in front of you 25 values cards, including one blank tile. Inside, you will find 25 cards, including one blank tile. Take a look at the values printed on each card. I'm seeing a note. Did you click the share sound button when you shared your screen? That might solve my problem.
Christina, I could hear a tiny bit, but it might be coming through your speaker. I'm not sure.
Yeah, probably. Do you mind if I just escape out and see if I can choose that share sound?
Yeah, go for it. So share again and then press the share sound. And there's also another little checkbox that's optimized for video sharing that if you click that, it helps too.
I see your screen sharing. I'm just curious where the share sound button is. If anyone knows.
I think you have to completely exit out of screen sharing. So if you put stop screen sharing and start again, it will be the very first screen. There's two little check boxes.
Thank you, friends. Technology. Got it. Okay. Okay, let's see if this works.
Inside, you will find 25 cards, including one blank tile. Take a look at the values printed on each card.
I'm sorry, guys. I really can do this, I believe. Okay, we're going to try this one last time. Can you just confirm for me that you can hear it?
We can hear it.
Yeah, I could hear it.
Excellent. Okay, here we go. Oh my goodness gracious.
Inside, you will find 25 cards, including one blank tile. Take a look at the values printed on each card. If there's something you know you value strongly that you don't see represented, write it into one of the blank slips and replace one of the values in the master list with it. You should always end up with 24 cards.
Okay, so you should always end up with 24 cards. If, as I said, if there is a value that is extremely important to you that you don't see represented in the deck, please write it on a piece of paper and replace one of the other values with it. Okay?
If you're doing this exercise with your friend, partner, or family, have one person follow the next steps all the way through without interruption before the next person completes the exercise. Lay all the cards on the table so their values are clearly visible. Separate the 24 cards into 2 equal groups, those you value most and those you value less. You're not deciding what I value and what I don't. You're just choosing one group of priorities over the other. Imagine you've got a backpack for a long trip and it only fits so much. Finding our true values is a lot like this.
Okay, so I'm going to pause there and give you a minute. So you are going to separate your values deck into 2 groups. One group of values you value more, and one group of values you value less. I'm going to give you 1 minute to do this. Like I said at the beginning, this is meant to be done intuitively, so move as quickly as possible. All right, about 20 more seconds. This is going to go quickly for some and very slowly for others.
Now take the group you value less and return them to the satchel.
Oh my goodness gracious.
You should now have...
I'm so sorry, you guys. Honestly, I can do this, I believe. What you're going to do now is, you get the idea. I don't need to keep planning through the video. You are now going to put the values that you value less to the side. You do not have a satchel, so just put them out where you can no longer see them. You will no longer need them. Here is the next step. The next step is to take the same group of values and divide them again. One group of values that you value more and one group of values that you value less. I'm going to give you another minute to go ahead and complete that exercise. So you're going to have 6 cards in one group and 6 cards in the other. One group you value more, one group you value less. Doesn't mean you don't value the ones you value less. It just means less. Twenty more seconds. All right. Please take the group of values you value less and put them out of sight, out of mind. You should be left with 6 cards. Arrange them however you like in front of you. And we're going to do that exercise one more time. I know, this is where I can hear you. I can see you all yelling at me. You are now going to take the 6 values in front of you. You're going to separate them to 2 groups. You know the drill. One group of values you value more, one group of values you value less. I'm going to give you another minute for this. Go ahead. All right, about 10 more seconds. This might be the easiest, this might be the hardest for you. All right, you know the drill. Take 3 cards that you value less and put them to the side. And congratulations, you've just identified your 3 core values. Hooray!
Inside, you will find 25 cards.
So we're going to talk about what they mean. So the interesting thing about our values is that these values is that they all mean something different to us. Balance might mean one thing to you and it might mean something completely different to another person. So I know you've been encouraged to have a journal or some paper to write on. I would like you to write down right now your 3 core values in your journal, if you have one, or a piece of paper. And I'd like you to take a minute or 2 to write at least 1 line for each value and what it means to you. So some of the questions you can ask yourself are what does this value mean? How will it impact my work or home life or friendships? Were there any surprises? And can you already see gaps between what you say you value and how you live your life? So take a minute to write down your 3 core values and write a line or 2 about what they mean to you. And if you want to, go ahead and share your values in the chat. That would be awesome. And if you want to share a comment or 2 about what they mean to you, you're more than welcome as well, and I'll read them back. Kathy says, wow, it all makes sense now. Kathy, can you write more? I want to know more what you mean. Maybe you're already seeing the gaps between what you say you value and how you live your life. And maybe it's a connecting for you, how that relates to your relationship with social media. Curious to hear. All right, Joanna says, core values, spirituality, my relationship with God, family, and relationship to others, specifically with friends and future spouse. Cool. What I realize is that the values I chose, I may not put them into practice. I'm curious if that means that you're not putting them to practice now, or that you don't think you can put them into practice in the future. Hopefully by the end of the session, you will be confident putting them into practice in the future. Christina Rebello in Toronto, another Christina in Toronto, family, other relationships, relationship with God are 3 values. Steffiana says integrity, which for her means moral uprightness and virtue, spirituality, prayer and putting relationship with God first, and relationships, family, friends, and others. Emily says play, having fun, laughing a lot, dancing through life. Spirituality, living life in the presence of God. And influence, contributing to the culture around me in a positive way. Beautiful. Rachel says family, loyalty, and freedom. Awesome. You guys can continue to share them there. Thank you so much for your sharing. I think it just really helps us all engage with one another and the insights that we're having. So really this whole exercise is the essence of JOMO, right? JOMO right here behind me. It's the joy of missing out on the right things. It isn't always, as you discovered in this values exercise, it isn't always choosing between good and bad, right? All of the values there could be arguably said to be good, right? But sometimes it isn't always about choosing between good and bad. Sometimes it's about choosing the better good, the one that serves us and others more, the one that promotes greater lasting well-being and success. Self-awareness can be tough. It occasionally requires us to admit things to ourselves that we didn't want to or have to until we took up the hard work of self-examination. You're not a bad person if you chose work over family. You're not lazy or immoral if you chose fun, as our friend already did today, over education or freedom over loyalty. What's important is that you're honest with yourself about those values, which will empower you to be honest with others on your journey. I encourage you to revisit the values exercise, and we'll be talking a bit about that at the very end of today's workshop. Maybe your answers will be the same, but maybe they won't. It doesn't mean they're wrong now or that they'll be wrong later. Our values grow and change with us. I just imagine what values I may have had when I was 18 years old versus now. The only thing that matters is that we're aware of them. We own them and live them with intentionality. And it's important to say that values are not just an intellectual commitment. They're meant to be enacted, woven into the fabric of our lives. When you come to forks in the road, at a point of decision-making, you can more confidently choose which path to take if you know what you truly value. So we already shared some of our values, which is awesome. Really identifying them means it's easier to live them. So way to go. I'm really excited to go back. I'm distracted by the chat. I can't wait to dive back in there after all of this to read all of the things that you wrote. So now let's talk about our friend, social media. You know the feeling. You hop onto Instagram or Twitter and news and photos begin pouring past your eyeballs. You went there for something, but now you can't remember what. This could also be true of any news site or any other site you go to that has any kind of live update feature. All the while we're downloading the values and desires, hopes and dreams, insecurities and ambitions of other people. Or we walk into a meeting or a room at home and someone's on their smartphone, so we take ours out too. Unlike infectious diseases, which can be transmitted from person to person, you can catch behaviors from people you've never even come into contact with. One study suggests that if someone in your broader social network gains weight, even someone a degree or two removed from you, your likelihood of gaining weight markedly increases as well. It's crazy, right? When I heard that, it just blew my mind. This is the concept of behavioral or social contagion. It's a type of social influence, which refers to the propensity for a person to copy a certain behavior of others who are either in their vicinity, near them, or whom they have been exposed to in some way. And we have never been able to access as many people as we are able to today online. Social contagion is wanting what other people have, or the crux here, appear to have. So I'm not going to dwell on the negatives of social media because I really want to get to solutions and forward motion for you. So I've got great news for you. There is a simple and powerful way to overcome social contagion in less than 10 minutes a day. And it comes from Harvard professor, Dr. Susan David, who's also the author of Emotional Agility. She says, knowing who you are and what you stand for is absolutely critical to bringing yourself fully to the world. Through her research, she discovered that thinking for even just 10 minutes a day, what are my values, is enough to reduce and counteract the effects of social contagion or FOMO. 10 minutes a day spent asking these questions. What do I value? What and who is dear to me? What matters to me most? How do I want to bring myself to the world? What are the non-negotiables in my life? What am I here for? You've been answering a lot of those questions this weekend. Who and what do I love? Well, you've already been answering some of those questions today by identifying your joys and identifying your values. Dr. Susan David says, what we know is that this exercise is an incredibly powerful protection against social and emotional contagion. It moves us from a space of thinking about our values as abstract ideas and into ways that our values can become front and center. And I'm going to be talking to you about a practice that will help you keep those values front and center moving forward. And she says, as a result, we become more agile, more focused, and more connected, empowering us to use social media and all digital technology for creativity, remember, connection, and caring for others. And we all need more of all of those things in our lives right now. Discovering our values is like setting the GPS for our lives. It's setting course to our destination. And I hope you're now seeing how articulating our values and joys are both practical and essential, keeping us on course to the life-giving and the good. So I'm actually going to let this next video play all the way through so I don't mess it up, but I'm going to explain it first. What we're going to do now with your values is we're going to look at the 3 primary ways you use your devices on a regular basis. So before I begin, I want you to start thinking right now, what are the top 3 tech tools I use on a regular basis? It could be Gmail, it could be Instagram, it could be Slack, it could be WhatsApp. I want you to start thinking what the top 3 uses you think you use your tech for on a regular basis. There is a more practical way to do that I explain in my Navigate membership, where you go into your battery usage. And if you know how to do that, by all means, get in there and see your top 3 uses in your time spent. But for right now, I want you to just to think about it and ask yourself with integrity, what are the 3 primary purposes I use my technology for? So I'm going to let this run and then we'll pause and talk about it.
Today, we're going to take a clear-eyed look at where your newly discovered values and time spent align. So here's what you're going to do. In the space provided in your workbook or in your journal, you're going to create 2 columns, one called time spent and the other called values. Now write down your 3 top apps and your 3 core values, like this. Take a moment and look at these side by side and observe what you see and feel. Remember, this is a self-discovery process. There is no room for shame or judgment here. Self-awareness is the way we meaningfully move towards change. You're doing great. Okay, now, I want you to look at the first item on the time spent list and ask yourself, with integrity, can I draw a line from this to the first value? If you can, draw a line. If not, just leave it blank. Then do this again with the same time spent item and the next value. Ask yourself again, can I, with integrity, draw a line from this action to this value? If so, draw a line. If not, leave it blank. Let me give you an example. Let's use Instagram. I have a friend who's lived all over the world and uses Instagram incredibly intentionally. She tracks her family's story with hashtags. They've moved from Scotland to Nashville, Vancouver to Toronto, and friends all over the world can follow through with their story on that platform. Don't automatically assume that an app is necessarily bad. You need to do the alignment exercise to see if it's lining up. Finally, do this again with the same item and the third value. Ask yourself again, can I, with integrity, draw a line from this action to this value? If so, draw a line. If not, leave it blank. Repeat this process with the other two time spent items on your list. When you are finished, you may have lines all over your paper. You may have a few, or you may have none at all. That's okay. Now, circle any of the items in either column that have no lines attached to them, like this. How do you feel about this? Let's say you had Gmail in your time spent column and relationships in your values column. You did not draw a line between them because you feel having email on your phone pulls you out of the present moment and makes it difficult to turn that part of your life off. Excellent. Now you can do something about it. As you may have guessed, the circles on your paper are where there's a clear misalignment between your values and time spent. That's what we want to solve for. Again, remember, no judgment. We are just noticing. This is what I call the wisdom of disturbance. A wisdom of disturbance is a gut feeling that can take us to new places if we pay attention. What wisdom, what aha moment emerged from this exercise? What's one significant action you think you can take today to bring your values and time spent into alignment?
All right. So I would love for you, a couple of you anyways, to share an aha moment you had in the chat. But I'd also love for one or two of you, and Brianne is ready to help you start sharing, share with us an aha moment you had aligning or potentially not aligning your values and the primary uses of your technology. So hop in the chat if you want to share an aha moment, if you had one. Otherwise, if you want to share, I just love like maybe two people to share how this exercise went for you. You can just go ahead and unmute, I think, right, Brianne?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can go ahead and unmute.
And if you have questions, please jump in the chat and ask them. We can help.
I just had a question. Is this the apps we use most like overall, or for example, just for personal life or just for work? Because like for work, I use email a lot, but maybe it's not like the app I would usually use.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think why don't we just go with personal because you have more control, right, okay, over the use of your personal, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
They're looking for, can you repeat the instructions again about the aha moment maybe?
Yeah, yes, of course. So you have discovered your 3 core values. And what I,
we missed like what we're circling and how we're connecting things.
Oh, yes. Okay. So what you want to do is have 2 columns. One is with your time spent, so your 3 primary uses you think of your primary devices. So that could be like Gmail, Instagram, and WhatsApp. Then you're gonna have your values beside it and see if you feel like with integrity, you can connect your values. Let's say they're community, integrity, and freedom. Do you feel like you can, with integrity, draw a line between the ways you're primarily spending your time on your devices and your core values? If you can, draw away. And if you can't, and there's no lines connecting between, or maybe there's a couple of them are missing a line, then you circle them. And that is something to pay a bit of attention to. It's an opportunity for you to see where your values and your time spent are aligning or misaligning. This is really just a self-awareness exercise. And what I was hoping to hear a couple of people share is what aha moment they had. Maybe it was, oh my goodness, I see fully how one value and the way I'm using this particular tech tool is aligning. Maybe your aha moment was you're seeing a disconnect. So I'd love if anyone is feeling brave to share with us their aha moment.
So Joanna, you can write it in the chat, or you can, it would be great if you want to share it out loud as well. You can unmute.
Yes.
I'd like to share.
Please.
Hey.
Great.
One thing I realized is that, well, one thing I tend to use a lot is Instagram, because I love looking through quotes, seeing how family's doing, looking at inspiration for future projects. And while it could help me with spirituality and relationships, I realized there's kind of a disconnect between that and integrity. Because I usually, when I do check Instagram, it's not in the time that I should. So it's not necessarily that the things I do on Instagram are necessarily bad use of time, but there's so many other things I could be doing in that moment that are better. Like, for example, I see a quote about good use of time, and I'm scrolling through Instagram looking at quotes about good use of time, and I'm like, there's something about this that's kind of off. So I thought that was a great aha moment for me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rosie. Anybody else?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I have balance, respect, and spirituality for my values. And my top 3 time spent is Zoom, FaceTime, and messages. And my aha moment is kind of like, wow, I've been really focused on trying to connect with people lately. And I think there is some kind of imbalance to that. And I'm not sure it connects to my respect or spirituality values as much. So I think that's my aha moment.
I'm curious, thank you so much, Kathy. I'm curious to know if you have a thought about how you might begin to make those things align a little bit more closely.
I think I'll be probably starting with balance on focusing on how it's affecting me in all. And I don't really know, I haven't really thought about respect. But spiritually, I do use these platforms. I do use them in order to grow in my spirituality. So I don't know. I'd have to think about it a little bit more.
Yes, indeed. I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, so thank you for getting
No problem.
We maybe have time for one more person. Otherwise, we can move on. I'll just wait for a second if one more person would like.
Alyssa has her hand raised.
Okay, yes, please.
Okay, so it looks like for me, I have community, respect, and relationship. And I found that my Instagram and WhatsApp, it's pretty related with my community and relationship. But like for the respect, it's very unclear for me. For example, I prioritize respect like for elders, for self-respect, and also like to respect in the community in general. But I don't know how like my use of social media especially can relate with my values and my time spending. For example, on Instagram, I can be like, it's very clear, like I use my Instagram to be surrounding with people and to help the communities. And WhatsApp will be also like to keep in touch with friends, family, and strangers. But also relationship is also for me, like not only families, but also my relationship with God, where I use it a lot with Instagram to share my relationship with God, which is related as a community. However, the respect that I use in my values is still like unclear how I can use in my time spending in my social media.
Thank you for sharing, Jalissa. And it's going to be, in some instances, it will be automatically clear where there's alignment and misalignment. I'm thinking of Jalissa and her example that she just shared about respect. I'm curious about her relationship with self-respect or respecting others and the ways that she communicates in those spaces. It sounds like there's a lot of alignment in the way that she's using those tools for communication with community. So if you just do a little bit more digging there, Jalissa, I think maybe you'll find that you are doing it in ways that respect both yourself and others. Anyways, that's my encouragement and challenge to you to dig a little deeper into that. Thank you so much to all of you who shared. And for those of you who are gathering in community, which is so awesome, I think the LA group is in community. Maybe after this, you guys can dig a little more deeper and talk about this with each other as well. So the way to make space for joy is to miss out on some things. I don't want to beat the drum here, but we do need to miss out on some things. And hopefully in this alignment exercise, you began to see where potentially you might need to miss out on something, something that's not aligning with your values. So we are going to now dig into very practical actions around our social media, and you actually are going to unfollow 20 social media accounts in about 5 minutes. So if you don't have your phone on, this is a perfect time to turn it on and make sure that you have them handy to do this exercise. So our social media follow list is really where we lose most of our time, especially on content we consume thoughtlessly or out of habit. Even if it gives us nothing at all or makes us feel outraged or depressed. And I can go in a long tirade, an explainer about how the algorithms are built in a way that does fuel and push up that kind of content to the top, but we don't have enough time for that today. So we'll just say some of that content is really not there to be consumed intentionally. Social media channels make it super easy to follow an account and instantly add it to our feed, usually in one click. And it's easy to understand why. The more accounts we follow, the more that shows up in our feed and in notifications if we have them. And there's one more thing that keeps us coming back. If we follow enough accounts, we've basically got an endless stream of new content, much of it anxiety-inducing, midnight doom scrolling, anyone? Demanding our response all day. So it's time to get intentional. For each account you follow, you're going to ask yourself 3 questions and answer again as quickly and instinctively as possible. If the answer to any of these questions is no, you're going to unfollow the account. So first, I'm going to go through the 3 questions you're going to ask yourself, and then there'll be a final screen with those 3 questions, and I'm going to give you a few minutes to get into your primary social account and try and unfollow 20 accounts. All right? So here are the questions. The first question is, you're looking at your follow list and you see someone there, and the question is, who is this? Do you know right now who or what this contact is? And it is sometimes shocking and slightly embarrassing when we start doing this exercise. We're like, like Jerry5216, like, who is this person? So that's the first question, is who is this? If we don't know who this person is, then we probably can unfollow. We can probably let it go. Okay. Second question is this. Does this feel good, or is it important? Is it your immediate emotional impression that this contact makes you feel good or is important to you right now? It may have been true that it was important to you before, or may have made you feel good before, but maybe over time, some jealousy has crept in, or some frustration has crept in, or it's just no longer important to you. And finally, do I want to bring this with me? I love this question. Is there a specific value in carrying this connection forward? And can you state for yourself exactly what this is? You're only answering for yourself here. Just like the other exercises, this is a completely personal exercise. No one else, including me, can answer these questions for you or judge your choices. I encourage you to be honest and courageous. So you're going to review 20 contacts and spend no more than 5 seconds on each question. Your goal right now is to unfollow 20 accounts. And if you're on a roll, by all means, take on more than 20. But here are the questions you're going to be asking yourself, and I'd like you to get started now. All right. So I said on here about 5 minutes. I think we've got time for that. 5 minutes, and you're going to follow 20 accounts. And maybe hopefully in the back of your mind, you have those 3 core values rolling around also in the mix of these 3 questions. Who is this? Does it feel good or is it important? Do I want to bring this with me? And we can add, does this align, or does this account or person align with my values? I'm going to give you about 2 more minutes. And again, just move as quickly as you can. Maybe we can have a bit of a competition. You can jump in the chat when time is up and tell us how many accounts you were able to unfollow. This is all about reclaiming space and time and attention for the things that you really value. All right, 1 more minute. Get ruthless. In my Navigate membership, we do this exercise at our monthly digital house cleaning parties. We clean up our social media and email accounts to keep them consistently aligned with our values and joys. It's actually super fun. And I do it myself as well, constantly keeping our accounts aligned with what we value and cleaned up of all the rest of the clutter is an incredibly powerful way to navigate the digital world with joy. All right, friends, we're going to stop there. If anyone wants to jump in the chat and share how many accounts they unfollowed, hop in there and do that. But I'm mindful of our time. We're going to move forward to the next bit of our session. So I'm just going to shout them out really quick. Aurelia in Trinidad, Tobago did 21. Whoop, whoop. Good job. Anyone else? 22. From Rosie in Texas. I'm not sure, but a lot. I needed more time, says Gia in Halifax. Absolutely. Please take that time after we're finished shortly. Yeah. So many accounts to unfollow. Once we get started, it can be a little addicting. All right. So I want to give you 3 Christian practices that you can begin implementing from home today that have to do with navigating technology, navigating social media. So we're going to just whip through these. First, I want you to place your values somewhere where you will see them every day. Write them out on a beautiful note card at the front of a journal, somewhere where you're going to see them every day. Remember, asking yourself, what do I value, is enough to overcome all of those outside influences we consciously and subconsciously encounter every day. So write them down and place them on your bedside table, beside your desk, write them in the front of your journal, somewhere where you can revisit your values daily. Sabbath. Honor the Sabbath and keep it holy. I encourage you to begin setting apart a tech-free day a week, 24 hours where you disconnect completely. And if that's daunting to you, then start with just a morning or an afternoon completely off, turn your devices off, power them down, and really put something else in that space. People get really freaked out by the idea of digitally disconnecting or detoxing. But if you fill that time with things that you love to do, then it's far less intimidating. All right. And then the next is something that well, I'm going to read this reflection first, and then I'm going to get into the third practice, which some of you may be very familiar with, and some of you may have never heard of before. I love this quote from Maria Dolores Ruiz Scaparlanda, whose name I'm sure I'm butchering, but she wrote this reflection on Lent a number of years ago in the New York Times, which I loved and I actually used in my first book. She says, the question for me is not whether there's a point to giving things up during Lent or on a day on Sabbath, but whether I should ever stop fasting from all that numbs, dulls, and deadens me to life. All of life as it is today, the good and the bad, fasting makes me willing to try. And so that is my encouragement to you, to reflect on this quote, this beautiful quote, this very challenging quote about aliveness and about joy and about giving things up as it pertains to Lent or Sabbath practices. And finally, the examine. So with some exceptions, our websites, apps, and really all of the digital tools we use, unless they're a mindfulness tool of some kind, most of them do not encourage reflection. Instead, they urge us to consume more email, more goods, more information. Screen time, when used at length mindlessly, falls firmly in the life-taking column. But the truth is, consumption is not our great and final goal. You all know this. We were made for more. And the examine of consciousness can help lead us there. So the examine, developed by Saint Ignatius Loyola, founder of the Jesuits, is a daily practice of spiritual reflection intended to help a person become aware of the presence of God in their life. A simplified version of the examine, a very simplified version of the examine is this. At the end of each day, ask, for what today am I most grateful? And for what am I least grateful? Put another way, and this is the practice that I personally use, what today was most life-giving and what was most life-taking. Saint Ignatius believed that the key to a healthy spirituality was to find God in all things and work constantly to gain freedom in our lives in order to cooperate with God's will. That meant seeking the good and the life-giving in the belief that God leads us to do more of those things that bring delight and peace. Remember, delight tied in with the word joy there, and fewer of those that bring heaviness, less of that which takes life. Over time, this centuries-old practice of reflection can be a very powerful tool. So those are the 3 practices that I wanted to share with you today. And to review, values drive our choices each day. We experience joy when we live in alignment with our aspirational values. Our practice values are evidenced by how we spend our resources. The internet is designed to hijack our resources, our time, attention, and energy in most cases. We must get smart with our limited resources, our time and attention, so we can live joyfully. So I just wanted to close by reading this quote from R.F. Capon, where he says, "Every real thing is a joy, if only we have eyes and ears to relish it, a nose and tongue to taste it." The digital world can lead us to joy if we use them in ways that support creativity and community and care, if they serve our long-term goals, if they're aligned with our values and our joys. It can be used for all of those purposes if we use them intentionally. The final thing I wanted to say is an invitation, really. I'd like to thank you all for being a part of this session today. I launched the Navigate membership to help all of us live in alignment with our joys on a regular basis. And just like our devices are part of our lives, just like our homes, our vehicles, and our bodies, we have to have regular maintenance of them to make them work for us. So the Navigate membership focuses on the wisest investment of your time online to help you live more deliberately and experience more joy. It's a step-by-step program designed to help you build a values-based approach to tech that's going to guide you with confidence and ease through all of the digital decision-making you'll have to do in the years and decades to come. And each week, members receive a new lesson with action steps. And every month, like I mentioned before, we join for a digital house cleaning party, a live community coaching call with me to clean up your inbox, your desktop, phone, and social profiles to optimize for joy. In addition to this, members also receive physical reminders, analog reminders in the mail to keep connected to what matters most. So if you want to sign up, please use the coupon code NAVIGATE. You get a free month. I'd love to have you there. And thank you again so much for being with me today. I think Brianne and I are going to have a little Q&A with you now. And I'm looking forward to answering your questions in the few minutes we have left.
Exactly. So what we'll have you do is just raise your hands for the other sessions, and especially there are many people who have not been able to ask questions yet now, who have not intervened in the other sessions. So especially if you haven't piped up yet, we'd love to hear from you. Any questions? We'll start with Eva.
Hi, Christina. Thank you for your talk. I was wondering, I recently watched the docudrama called Social Dilemma, and I was wondering what you think about it, and a little bit like it is a little, I would say, like doomsday. At the same time, I think it's good in that, like, because it's so dramatic, it makes you change your behavior. But I was just wondering, how accurate do you think what it depicts is?
Great question, big question. I think it is very accurate. I think a miss on the filmmaker's part was exactly what you identified at the beginning, which was that it was very doom and gloom. It did not focus on community action, on individual action, empowerment at the end. And my colleagues, most of them do feel like that was a big missed opportunity. I do have an episode on my podcast, I can throw it in the chat, with David Yarthy, who's a Toronto-based UX designer, and we do discuss the social dilemma at length. But I mean, all of the things that are present there are ultimately true in terms of the ways in which particular content is amplified, right, for likes, all of the data, right, extraction that is happening across all the platforms you use on a regular basis, all those TNCs, all those terms and conditions where we essentially sign our lives away, or at least all of our data away. All of that is true. There's nothing in the social dilemma that is untrue. But the truth is there are people working at global levels all across the world to come down on the really like terrible practices that are being used at the top. And so there's the IEE, and there's a lot of work, especially in Europe, to get all of these things under control. So I would say watch it. Maybe listen to the interview I did with David Yarthy. He's a beautiful mindfulness teacher as well as UX designer. He's got a blog called The Attention Activist, which is also an amazing resource about reclaiming your attention. But yeah, I do feel that there is much more to be said about what personal actions we can take on a regular basis. I want to put together some resources for you guys. There's a couple of books. There's one book in particular written by a former Google employee who was one of the original co-founders of the Time Well Spent movement, which is Tristan Harris's organization now, the Center for Humane Tech. He wrote a book called Stand Out of Our Light, which is the best book I've ever read on the attention economy. It's very slim. It's actually also available as like a free download, I think, from Cambridge Press. So if you want to like a primer, that's probably the best book I would recommend. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I just like how you're teaching us like how we can maybe take more control, because basically watching that, the only conclusion is that we need regulation, whereas it's like we can actually take control of our own use of technology. But anyway,
Yeah,
that's my comment.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm glad.
Celia, go ahead.
Okay, I just have a question about reflection, because I find that especially young people, it's really hard for them to reflect. So I was wondering if you have any tips on how to help like the younger crowd, like, I don't know, like 15, 16-year-olds, to help them reflect about their use of technology and their values. Thank you.
Great question. This is the question, isn't it? How to make space. I would encourage, if they have any kind of, faith, relationship to faith, to encourage making space, even, the built-in practices that we already have around Sabbath, for example. I think one of the beautiful gifts that Sabbath gives personally to me is a reminder that the world keeps turning without me, that I'm not the center of the universe, that when I disconnect from social media and the internet, like the world just keeps on ticking just fine. And I think that's an incredibly important reminder. It gives you just enough space to kind of step back and see just how sort of inconsequential it is. And I think you do need to have that space, at least a bit of space, to start a discussion around how to use it in a way that aligns with your values. I would also encourage them, like I would suggest them starting, if you're in a mentorship relationship with them and you feel like you've got that presence to, challenge them into a practice, get them to track their technology experiences, like the Pamela Pavlisak person I mentioned. Get them to track their technology experiences for even just a couple of days. It's quite amazing to see the ways in which it can feel really, really good in weird ways, and also really, really bad. And even that little bit of, even 24 hours of paying attention to that can provide really great insight. Back at you, Cecilia.
Thumbs up. Yeah. Rosie, you have a question.
Yes, I was wondering, do you have any specific strategies for how, in the moment, when our craving is at its strongest and our phone is right in front of us, we've resolved not to touch it for the rest of the day or the next hour, however long, how do we overcome that craving and live integrity?
Yeah, great question. So I talk about a lot in the membership around creating mindful friction. Essentially, digital friction is making things just difficult enough that we have to stop and ask ourselves, is this really what I want to be doing right now? And so one of the ways you can do that is by making it more difficult to get to time wasters. So a very practical way to do that is to, if first of all, just deleting email and social media off your phone is the number one thing you can do to reduce the use of them, the habitual use of them. A step below that is putting them a couple of swipes away on your device in a folder, and give that folder a creative name, like "Are you sure?" or "Toxic waste," or "Consumption." I call mine consumption. Anything that's like consumptive, I put in there, just so I know, okay, Christina, that's what you're choosing to do right now. You're choosing to consume. But another thing to do is put joy in your way. Like put the things that you want to do right in front of you, like in front of the device even. So you want to spend more time doing X, you want to spend more time writing or painting or playing an instrument or calling your mom, write a note to call your mom, or put that easel in front of where you store your phone. These sort of like little incentives and these little bits of friction really do help to build habits over time. But it needs to be said that the devices are built in a way that works against you 100% of the time. So you do need to get really creative in your solutions. I hope that gives you a couple of ideas.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, you're so welcome.
Very good practical tips. Queenie, maybe we have time for this last question.
Thanks, Christina. Question for Catholics, for example, who have given up social media during Lent, the 40 days before Easter, very tough. And then, they've survived. Easter Sunday comes up and then they're like, okay, I'm going to check my social media, of course. And then, but the thing is, how can, any tips on how to not get absorbed unnecessarily in social media after you've survived 40 days without it? Any ideas?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I took a 31-day break from the internet in its entirety, which was sort of the impetus for me writing my book. And I think a similar thing would happen when you give up social media for Lent, where when you come back, it's like drinking from a fire hose. It's like if you've water fasted and the first meal you have back is not to eat an enormous cheeseburger, you'd feel terrible. And so I would recommend to people that have given it up for Lent to take that opportunity when they come back on to notice right away, what's working, exactly what we just went through. Is this important to me? Is this life-giving for me? Is this aligned with my values? Do that exercise right then and there and get rid of the stuff that's, not serving. When I went back online, the first thing I did was probably spend half a day unsubscribing from newsletters, unfollowing accounts, because it became so obvious which I needed to bring back into my life and those that I didn't. So I would encourage them to take it slow and onboard mindfully and take that opportunity to clean things away. Easier said than done, I know, especially with people that really love it, but that would be my suggestion.
Fantastic. Christina, thank you so very much for being with us this afternoon. I think you've given us a lot of practical tips, but even more importantly, the inspiration and this desire to really use social media according to our values and to look for that joy and the hope that it's possible. No, so
it is possible. You're all amazing. Implementing and continuing forward with any one of these pieces is going to really serve you well. So I encourage you all. You're doing great. Thanks for being here and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you so very much. So Christina, I'm going to we had the last session actually right now is a breakout session room. If you want to stick around while everybody divides, no problem, but otherwise we can catch up afterwards. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So ladies, what we'll do now is the same dynamic as yesterday in the breakout rooms. So we're going to be breaking out according to